All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're digging into a dataset that's honestly kind of wild. The final meals of notorious American Mafia bosses. Now, what someone eats right before they die might just sound like morbid trivia, but in the underworld, it is incredibly revealing. We're going to see exactly how these last meals expose the intense culture, the underlying vulnerability, and the true priorities of men who built absolute empires of fear. Think about the ultimate paradox here. These guys controlled entire cities. They'd literally order hits over a plate of linguine, and they absolutely knew that any meal could be their last. The dining table was totally sacred in their world, but at the exact same time, it was hands down the most dangerous place a boss could sit. So let's look at section 1, the ultimate vulnerability, or the paradox of the mafia table.
Sitting down for a meal was often the most lethal moment in a mafioso's life. Why? Because breaking bread was the ultimate test of loyalty. If a guy ate with you, it meant trust. And the thing about trust is, that's exactly when you drop your guard. You're relaxed, you're looking down at your plate, and bam, that's when the door behind you opens and someone you were just laughing with yesterday takes you out. In this world, food and death were just completely tangled up together.
Which brings us to section 2, the restaurant trap, looking at public dining and violent ends. If you look across the decades, eating out in public was practically a death sentence. Back in 1931, Joe Masseria sits down for lobster and spaghetti at Coney Island. His lunch buddy, Lucky Luciano, goes to the restroom, and Masseria gets shot 6 times, dying with an ace of spades in his hand right next to the lobster shells. Fast forward to 72, Crazy Joe Gallo is having his birthday dinner, shrimp and scungoli salad, before getting gunned down on the sidewalk. And then in 79, Carmine Galante gets ambushed right on a restaurant patio. Just picture the sensory whiplash with that Galante assassination. He's enjoying this super light, breezy summer lunch in Brooklyn. Green salad, sardines, hunks of crusty bread, hot July day. And out of nowhere, 3 guys in ski masks burst in and just unleash a barrage of gunfire. That peaceful lunch instantly turns into one of the most infamous crime scene photos ever, with Galante dead on the patio, his half-eaten food right there, and his trademark cigar still literally clenched between his teeth. But honestly, the cruelest twist of the restaurant trap definitely goes to Big Paul Castellano, the boss of the Gambino family. We're talking about a guy pushing 300 pounds. He's heading to Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan. He absolutely loved their aged beef, but he never even makes it inside the door. He's ambushed by shooters in trench coats the second he steps out of his Lincoln Town Car. The table stays empty, the steaks never get cooked. For a man with his massive appetite, dying hungry on the sidewalk while John Gotti watches from a block away, that is a deeply ironic end. Moving on to section 3, the myth of luxury, Hollywood versus the peasant reality.
So we've all been completely conditioned by the cinematic version of the mafia, right? Guys in bespoke suits having these endless, elaborate dinners with lobster tails and $1,000 bottles of wine. But the actual reality? Drastically different. These men grew up desperately poor. They came from immigrant households where meat was super rare. So even when they're raking in millions and running whole cities, they aren't craving caviar. They just wanted crusty bread, Sunday gravy, escarole and beans. They wanted the peasant survival food of their ancestors.
Take Joe Colombo as a perfect example of this street food reality. Right before he gets shot at Columbus Circle, what's his final meal? It wasn't some VIP banquet. People literally saw him eating a sweet Italian sausage and pepper sandwich from a festival cart. Just cheap street food, eating it standing up, grease dripping down his hand. That basic sandwich was the absolute last solid food he'd ever eat before a bullet put him in a coma for 7 years. Okay, let's pause for a second here. We've seen brutal restaurant hits, and we've seen guys taken out grabbing street food. Are you noticing a pattern in how these men died, and specifically where they were? If we look at the data, there's a really clear divide. The bosses who chased the limelight, who were always out in public fighting over money or drugs, they died incredibly violent deaths, almost always at restaurants. But the guys who passed away peacefully of old age, they were at home, doors locked, eating their wife's cooking. If your meal got interrupted by gunfire, you trusted the wrong people. If you were eating a home-cooked plate of pasta, it meant you survived the game. Let's hit section 4, lost power in prison, the institutional men. So what happened if they didn't get shot? Well, in prison, they faced the ultimate loss of status. These were titans. Vito Genovese, a guy who had the most powerful crime family in America named after him, ends up in a federal pen eating literal trays of instant mashed potatoes and canned veggies. Fat Tony Salerno went from eating fresh pastries in East Harlem to eating powdered eggs in Missouri. And John Gotti, the dapper Don who threw those massive street feasts, couldn't even swallow at the end. He was on a feeding tube in a concrete medical ward. Ultimately, they ate the exact same watered-down slop as everybody else. Which brings us to Section 5, the safe home kitchen, essentially the foxhole of the mafia.
The bosses who actually lived to see old age figured out something super important. A restaurant is totally unpredictable, but your home kitchen is a fortress. Carlo Gambino, the boss of bosses, dies peacefully in his favorite chair watching the Yankees right after a plate of his wife's baked ziti. Tony Accardo, who somehow never spent a single night in jail, dies of old age at 86, smelling his wife's pasta fagioli on the stove. Even Al Capone spent his last years safely eating his mama's spaghetti and meatballs. They dodged the restaurants, stayed home, and that's exactly why they lived.
But there's a catch. Even your house wasn't a total safe zone if you let the wrong guy in. Look at the incredibly disturbing end of Sam Giancana, the boss of the Chicago outfit. It's 11 p.m., and he's in his basement kitchen frying up sausage, peppers, and beans. Now, you don't just cook that kind of heavy meal at 11 p.m. for yourself, right? You cook it for a guest. Giancana let someone in that he trusted so completely, he literally turned his back to the guy to cook for him, and the killer shot him right in the back of the head. When police found him, the room still smelled like gunpowder and Italian sausage.
Finally, Section 6, food outlasts the men, focusing on memory, identity, and home.
What I really want you to take away from this explainer is that the food these guys obsessed over, it was actually never about flexing their power. Every single bowl of Sunday gravy, every piece of bread dunked in olive oil, it was just a direct link back to the poor villagers their families came from in Italy. They built these ruthless, terrifying empires, but when they sat down at the table, they just wanted a plate of pure nostalgia.
So I'm gonna leave you with this. We've seen massive empires totally collapse, billions of dollars gone. Men who ruled cities, either bleeding out on the pavement or hooked up to feeding tubes. But the recipes survive. If the food always outlasts the men, what does it say about us that the most feared, violent bosses in American history, right at the very end, just wanted a taste of their mom's cooking? It's a pretty stark, deeply humanizing reality compared to the brutal lives they actually lived. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you in the next one.